Tony Hawk was on the Xbox 360 last year, but this year you're getting the first Tony Hawk game that's been developed from the ground up for the current generation of systems. And by current, I mean Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. With the upgrade to the new generation of consoles, the game's undergone some pretty dramatic transformations in terms of graphical presentation and animation. A lot of the same trick animations have been used for years and years at this point, and now they're all kind of new, and you have ragdoll physics. And on top of that, there have been some interesting gameplay twists as well. Unfortunately, there's some technical issues and specifically frame rate problems that get in the way on both the 360 and the PlayStation 3.
Hey, check it out. I've been tweaking the stair set to make it a little more interesting. Seems like you skate pretty good. Why don't you show me what you got?
Project 8 still has a career mode, much like the Tony Hawk games have had before it, but it's pretty different this time around. Rather than select a difficulty setting right at the start, many of the goals in the games actually have 3 levels of completion. So if you're kind of new to the series and you're just kind of messing around, you can get the first, which is the amateur, but many of the other goals go on to have a pro goal as well as a sick level goal. And unlike previous years, the sick level goal, which is meant to be the hardest, is actually really hard. A lot of the goals have also been revamped. There's plenty of new types of goals in Project 8. Probably the clearest example of that is the chalk challenge. And these are different types of tricks. You'll have a nada spin or a wall ride chalk challenge, but grind is probably the most common one. And how these work is you'll see just a chalk marking on the pavement or on a rail, and this kind of signifies where you need to start your line, start grinding, start manualing, whatever it says on the chalk. And from there you need to get to the next chalk marker, which is the am line, and then you can maybe get out a little further, you can get to the pro line, and then all the way around to the sick line if you're really good at the game. There are also other new types of goals like skate demos, which is where you kind of skate in front of a crowd, and you have to keep the crowd pleased. So the crowd is broken up into 3 different sections, and each section kind of has its own zone, and when you do tricks in that zone, it'll please that part of the crowd. So you have a timer ticking down. You need to kind of quickly go between the 3 zones and make sure that each one of the sections is kept happy. On top of that, you will run into a lot of the pro skaters in the game. You play as a created skater throughout the career mode. And the pros turn up to offer little challenges here and there, and these are also pretty unique. There are 9 pro challenges in all, and that's not counting the grand finale where Tony Hawk kind of asks you to do something, but that's depending on how well you've done on the other goals in the game. If you completed the goals mostly on the amateur level, you'll get one kind of ending or one sort of challenge to end the game with, but if you've done a little better and completed more of the pro challenges, you get a different one, sick, and so on. You're basically working your way up into Project 8. Tony Hawk describes Project 8 as his new venture, which is really kind of creepy sounding. It's really kind of nondescript, but in theory, he's looking for the top 8 skaters in town, and you start out ranked number 200. Each time you complete a goal, each time you find a gap or a secret spot or something like that, you start to move up those rankings, and your goal, of course, is by the end of the game to make number 8. Beyond the goal system, the action in Tony Hawk's Project 8 is very similar to what you found in previous games. It's still the same sort of typical types of tricks you've come to expect from the Tony Hawk gamer here. They've actually cut a few of the tricks that were in last year's game. This stuff doesn't really stick out as missing. It's more that they kind of streamlined it and made the trick system work better overall. The new gameplay system in the game is called Nail the Trick, and how this works is at any point you can jump in the air and push in on both analog sticks. When you do that, the game will drop into slow motion and the camera will focus on your feet and the board. At that point, the analog sticks basically become mapped to your feet, your left and right foot, so you can kind of move them in different directions and get the board spinning in different ways. The key to this part is that you can branch the tricks, so whenever the board kind of lines up with your feet again, you can push in a different direction and get it spinning in a different way. It is actually quite difficult at first, but as you get used to it, it's a really interesting and pretty cool way to kind of rack up some points. Project 8's career mode takes place in one big city. You're actually limited to a very small part of it right off the bat, but as you complete goals, there will be specific goals that will open up other parts of the world. And eventually it just becomes one large, seamless world. It's a wide world with no load times as you move between areas, and it works pretty well. The size of the world is pretty striking, and as you get it all open, it really is an interesting place to skate. At its core, Tony Hawk's Project 8 is the same game on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, but a lot of the external features are pretty different. The major one being the Xbox 360 version has online for up to 8 players, and also has online leaderboards for a lot of the goals in career mode. The PlayStation 3 version doesn't have any online whatsoever. It's a pretty glaring omission. I mean, the Tony Hawk series was the series that kind of pioneered online on the PlayStation 2, and it's just kind of crazy that it's not there at all. On top of that, the performance in terms of graphics is definitely noticeably different, but not in the way you might think. The PlayStation 3 version does look a little bit better in terms of just the still image, the skater models, stuff like that. There's a slight difference, but there is a pretty big trade-off with that, as the frame rate on the PlayStation 3 version dips really, really low in some spots. It's really unstable and pretty uneven throughout. The Xbox 360 version doesn't exactly have a stable frame rate itself, but for the most part, it is definitely more stable than what you see on the PlayStation 3. The PlayStation 3's differentiating factor is that it has support for the 6-axis controller. It's got those gyros inside for tilting it around, and you can basically play the entire game with it almost one-handed. You can steer with it, you can set it to do your balance, you can select tricks with it. It's an interesting idea, and it's kind of neat to play the game like that for a little while and kind of get a feel for what the 6-axis controller can do, and you can turn on different aspects of it or turn off different aspects of it and adjust the sensitivity. But none of the settings are really going to replace the standard controls for the game. It's a neat idea that's kind of fun to mess with, but it's tough to imagine anyone actually wanting to play the game seriously with the 6-axis stuff on for any real length of time. Tony Hawk's Project 8 makes a lot of neat and interesting additions to the career mode, the new scoring system, and on top of that, Nail the Trick, and the redesigned career mode with the different goals. It's a shame that it has its technical issues, and it's a shame that the PlayStation 3 version doesn't have any online support, but at the end of the day, this is a quality game. If you're a fan of the Tony Hawk series, you're definitely going to enjoy what this one has to offer.